The story is about two close friends, two little girls named Jung Yun and Kyung. The two are always together and share countless joys and sorrows. This beautiful friendship is something they have always cherished, because one of the two girls has a different background. Jung Yun is a child who was abandoned by her mother and grew up in a welfare center. Her greatest dream is to see her mother again. The only information about her mother has always been carefully kept in the director's office. Out of longing for her mother, Jung Yun secretly sneaked in there with Kyung to look for the record about her. But unfortunately, just when she was about to find it, she was caught by the director. The woman was furious with Jung Yun, not because the girl had rummaged through the files without permission, but because she had already advised Jung Yun many times, yet the girl was too stubborn. A woman who heartlessly abandoned her own child means she no longer wants to take that child back. So why keep hoping and searching anymore? But no matter what the director said, Jung Yun still wanted to see her mother at least once. She even always carried with her a photo, a portrait of a very famous actress. Jung Yun admired this woman greatly and always thought her own mother must be just as beautiful, and she wished that when she grew up, she would also become a talented actress like her. Then one day, on her way home, Jung Yun happened to see a boy being chased by a thug. Out of kindness, she stood up to help him and drove the thug away. Thanks to that, the two got to know each other. The boy was not only very handsome but also kind, and he wanted to escort Jung Yun home to thank her, which made the little girl start to have a crush on him. The next day, she told her best friend about it, which made Kyung even more curious about that person. Out of curiosity, the girl chased after her friend to ask more details, not paying attention to the car behind, and almost got into an accident. The woman who stepped out of the car left both of them completely stunned, because she was the actress Myung-ja. Kyung even forgot about her own pain, and told her best friend to quickly ask for the actress's autograph. Hearing that, Jung Yun immediately took out the photo to ask for her signature. Meeting her idol for the first time, she was overjoyed. The house the actress wanted to visit happened to be Young-jo's house. Because her company was in financial trouble, she came with her manager that day to beg the chairman for help to save the company from bankruptcy. But before giving an answer, he said he needed time to think. They left in disappointment and met Young-jo on the way. They heard that he would soon go to England to study abroad. The manager intended to strike up a friendly conversation with Young-jo to build a good relationship, but accidentally revealed that his mother was still alive, even though the chairman had always lied to his grandson that she was dead. Upon hearing that his mother was still alive, Young-jo was completely shocked. Since he had grown up without a father, he longed even more for his mother's love. He tried to chase after the manager to ask for information about her but failed. Young-jo could only go to see his grandfather. For years, the chairman had worked hard to keep this secret hidden. Now that it was exposed, he did not deny it, but told Young-jo to forget that woman because she was the one who caused him to lose his son. Not believing his grandfather's words, Young-jo was determined to find Myung-ja to get the truth, and he learned that long ago, she and his mother had known each other. When Young-jo's mother worked at a restaurant, she met his father. Although she was a widow with a child, and he was a married man, they still came together. But their happy days did not last long, as he was diagnosed with cancer and passed away soon after she gave birth to Young-jo. Right after the funeral, Young-jo's mother disappeared and left him behind. So Myung-ja thought that a woman so heartless as to abandon her child like that was not worth finding. But to Young-jo, his mother must have had her own painful reasons for doing so. On the way back, Young-jo happened to see the thug from the other day, who once said he was his brother, so he must know where his mother was. Young-jo rushed over, pushed the man down, and forced him to reveal her whereabouts. Han-soo stubbornly refused to say a word, so the two ended up fighting. When the police arrived, he tried to run away but was pulled back by Young-jo. Young-jo was determined to take him to the police station, believing it was the only way to see his mother. Seeing a thug arguing with a student, the police naturally assumed the thug was the one who started it. Even though Han-soo insisted he had been attacked first, they did not believe him, so Young-jo took the chance to request a guardian to come for mediation. At the same time, Jung Yun came to the police station to ask them to help find her mother. However, all the information about her was classified, so they could not reveal anything to her. Her last bit of hope vanished, leaving Jung Yun deeply devastated. At that moment, she accidentally overheard a conversation between Mrs. Kim and Young-jo. He only wanted to know why his mother had left him back then. She said it was because she had taken money from his grandfather and was even given a beauty salon. She only had to leave quietly to have everything, but if she disobeyed him, she would lose it all. That was why she left. so Young-jo could live in that house and enjoy a wealthy life. Seeing this, Jung Yun felt a deep sympathy, as she too had no mother. Thinking that this woman was too heartless, she ran after her, begging her to at least go back and hold Young-jo once for comfort, but she couldn't. If she went back, she feared she wouldn't have the courage to leave again. Witnessing the separation between mother and son made Jung Yun even more afraid she would never see her own mother. She returned to beg the police once more, but was still refused. Because of her overwhelming sadness, Jung Yun burst into tears, so pitifully that she caught Young-jo's attention. Realizing she was the girl who had saved him before, he started a conversation and invited Jung Yun to his favorite noodle shop to help them both forget their sorrows. Thanks to that meal, the two became close. Since they shared similar circumstances, they understood each other even more. Wanting another chance to see Jung Yun, Young-jo invited her to go to the cinema with him on Thursday. At that moment, Jung Yun suddenly remembered she had a promise with her best friend, so she said goodbye to Young-jo. Meanwhile, Yu-kyung had been waiting for a long time and was getting anxious. A group of thugs in the shop saw her alone and came over to tease her. Not wanting trouble, Yu-kyung walked away, which made them angry, so they chased after her to teach her a lesson. When Jung Yun arrived, she could no longer see Yu-kyung and anxiously ran around looking for her, eventually finding a scarf left behind on the road. Right then, Jung Yun heard a scream and immediately ran toward it, seeing her friend in danger. She rushed in to rescue Yu-kyung and shouted for help. The thugs fled when they saw people coming. However, Yu-kyung was injured and had to be taken to the hospital for treatment, which made Jung Yun feel terribly guilty, believing it was all her fault. But Yu-kyung wasn't angry at all. She even invited her friend to stay over at her house. Unexpectedly, they overheard her mother's phone call with someone. It was only then that Yu-kyung learned she was actually adopted. Now that her mother had been betrayed by her husband, who took all their money and ran away, she no longer wanted to raise her. Things had come to this point, yet Yu-kyung still refused to accept it. She cried and begged her mother not to abandon her, but the woman coldly told Yu-kyung to go live with Jung Yun at the orphanage, then left her there as if they had no connection anymore. Jung Yun, with good intentions, wanted to stay and comfort her friend, but Yu-kyung pushed her away and told her to leave. The next day, the whole school was abuzz with rumors that Yu-kyung had been beaten by thugs so badly she had to be hospitalized, which made her believe Jung Yun had revealed it, and she was furious. Not only did she slap her friend, but she also ended their friendship completely. Moreover, Jung Yun was the one who knew her secret, that she was an abandoned child. Every time she saw Jung Yun, Yu-kyung was reminded of that painful wound, so she didn't want to see her anymore and decided to transfer schools because of her grief. After arguing with her best friend, Jung Yun forgot about her appointment with Young-jo, leaving him waiting for hours. When she finally remembered and rushed there, he was already gone. That was also the last day Young-jo stayed in Korea. He left to study abroad without ever having the chance to learn Jung Yun's name. 10 years later, the two finally met again. But as soon as they did, Jung Yun slapped Young-jo. Although they had reunited, neither of them recognized each other, and they even had unnecessary misunderstandings. Thinking Young-jo had scammed her friend out of 10 million won, Jung Yun got angry. But after talking with him, she realized she had wrongly accused a good person. Although he worked in the film production department, the casting was handled by someone else, so the person who deceived Jung Yun's friend definitely wasn't Young-jo. Moreover, since he was the chairman's grandson, there was no way he would need money badly enough to do something so despicable. Realizing her mistake, Jung Yun felt deeply guilty and apologized to Young-jo repeatedly. She had no idea that her old friend was also there. Yu-kyung, sitting nearby, had secretly overheard everything and found out that Young-jo was the chairman's grandson. It was also her first day at work, and she was assigned to his department. Meanwhile, the man impersonating Young-jo was still out there scamming other girls. Up to now, Jung Yun still kept the man's business card and showed it to Young-jo, but he said he had no idea who that person was. At the same time, he gave her some advice as someone who dreamed of becoming an actress. He told her to face reality and not be delusional about her own talent, or she would be deceived again. But Jung Yun believed she truly had talent, a rough gem waiting to be polished. She said that if Young-jo gave her a chance to audition, she would definitely shine. However, after looking over her resume, he found nothing remarkable about her. She had only finished high school and didn't even have a stable job, yet she dared to claim she was talented. Young-jo said she was no different from a worthless stone, which deeply hurt Jung Yun. Just as she was about to leave, she happened to see someone very familiar. It was Yu-kyung, the friend she had always wanted to see again. But Yu-kyung deliberately avoided her. She tried to walk away quickly to shake off Jung Yun, but in the end, Jung Yun still caught up. After such a long time apart, Jung Yun was overjoyed to reunite. However, Yukyung still hated her, just like before. She didn't want to have anything to do with Jung Yun, and said that even if they met again, they should act as if they had never known each other. Being treated so coldly by her own friend made Jung Yun very sad. But she quickly regained her spirit when she received a call for an audition. Her roommate also wanted to go and try her luck, so the two hurried to the company to audition in front of Youngjo and Kang Woo. Both performed enthusiastically and supported each other well, but only Jung Yun successfully passed the preliminary round. However, out of jealousy, Yoo Kyung secretly used a paper cutter to destroy Jung Yun's file. On the day the results were announced, Jung Yun had high hopes, but ended up with disappointment. Since things turned out that way, she could only give up. But before leaving, she still wanted to meet Yoo Kyung once more to reminisce about their old memories, completely unaware that this very friend had betrayed her. Myung-ja was Jung Eun's idol, and the reason she wanted to become an actress, but she didn't know that Myung-ja was actually Yoo Kyung's biological mother. When Jung Eun met her again, she felt extremely nervous, wondering if the woman would recognize her. But Myung-ja had no idea who Yoo Kyung was, because this mother, apart from sending money for others to raise her daughter, had never seen her child's face. When Yoo Kyung was little, her adoptive mother once revealed that Myung-ja was her mother after seeing her appear on TV. Now that she was finally meeting her mother again, the woman said that her whole life was devoted to cinema, and that her public image meant everything to her. Those careless words only deepened Yoo Kyung's resentment toward her mother. Meanwhile, on Young-jo's side, he was driving when he happened to see Jung Eun and took her to eat at a small diner. While eating noodles, Young-jo split his chopsticks and handed them to Jung Eun, which reminded her of the boy she had met when she was little. Having failed the audition, Jung Eun felt a bit disappointed. She once wanted to become famous to find her mother, but now that dream seemed too far away. However, on the day of casting, the director went through all the candidates but wasn't satisfied with any of them, which reminded him that he had once approved Jung Yoon's file, but now she was nowhere to be found. Immediately, the chairman asked his subordinates, but Yoo Kyung quickly found an excuse to avoid the question. No one had Jung Eun's contact information, but fortunately, Young-jo did. So he immediately called Jung Eun to come over. Her best friend also benefited from this, and the two of them got the chance to appear in the upcoming film. During a meeting, Miryun suddenly received a phone call revealing the location of the scammer. She rushed there to catch him and forced him to return her money. The man had no money left, so he promised to give her free services at his mother's beauty salon and told her to call Young-jo over. It turned out that this man was Young-jo's half-brother, sharing the same mother. After 10 years, meeting again like this, Han-soo told his younger brother about their mother's condition. He said she was seriously ill, so the older brother took Young-jo to visit her. Wanting to create a chance for the two to reunite, he didn't expect to find her at a bar with a young man. Even when she saw her youngest son again, the mother didn't even blink, leaving Young-jo disappointed and walking away. His brother tried to chase after him to explain, but it only led to an argument and even a fight with the people there. When Jung Yun arrived after being called by her friend, she happened to see Young-jo and wanted to know why he was injured, but he left without saying a word. It wasn't until Jung Eun overheard Han-soo arguing with his mother that she realized the woman looked familiar. Shocked, she remembered meeting her 10 years ago at the police station. That meant Young-jo was the boy from back then. Realizing he was the one she had always missed, Jung Eun was overjoyed. She couldn't wait to tell him the news and immediately ran to find Young-jo. At that moment, everyone was gathered there drinking, including Yoo Kyung. Since Young-jo was busy singing with the others, Jung Eun went over to sit next to her to wait for him. She also told Yoo Kyung that she had found the boy from 10 years ago and that it was Young-jo. Hearing this shocking news, Yoo Kyung was more surprised than anyone. She didn't want them to have a chance to recognize each other, so she deliberately approached Young-jo first and forcefully kissed him. Under the influence of alcohol, the two ended up spending a passionate night together. The next morning, Yoo Kyung acted completely calm as if nothing had happened and asked Young-jo to keep it a secret, not to let anyone know about their relationship. Since she made that request, he didn't want to argue and simply treated it as a one-night stand. But in reality, Yoo Kyung had already begun scheming. If Young-jo was truly the chairman's heir, she would never let him slip away. Moreover, to stop Jung Eun and Young-jo from realizing who they were to each other, Yoo Kyung threatened that if Jung Eun revealed the truth now, rumors would quickly spread about her closeness with Young-jo. And for an actress like Jung Yun, That kind of scandal could destroy her entire career. Besides, Young Jo might not even remember who she was. Because of Yoo Kyung's words, Jung Yun was shaken and, as a result, could only choose to temporarily keep their past connection a secret. Meanwhile, Mi-ryun went to a beauty salon for makeup, preparing for her filming scene, when Mrs. Kim arrived and tore up all the vouchers Han Soo had given her. In return, she would repay all the money her son had swindled from Mi-ryun, on the condition that she never get involved with him again. Being treated like a gold digger for no reason, Mi-ryun felt deeply wronged. Her mental state was affected, and being nervous during her first film shoot, she kept making mistakes, forcing multiple retakes, until the director got so angry he fainted from frustration. As a result, it was no surprise that she was fired on her very first day at work. During that time, the chairman's illness gradually worsened. Before he passed away, Young Jo's older brother and stepmother cut ties with him, treating him as an illegitimate child unworthy of their family. When the funeral took place, the company employees finally learned that Young Jo was the chairman's biological grandson, and their attitude toward him completely changed. However, it was still uncertain who would inherit the film company, as many people were fighting over it. While feeling deeply sorrowful, Young Jo happened to see Jung Yun enthusiastically helping her colleagues paint the walls. To gain more acting experience, she even worked without pay, saying that being an intern was enough for her. Seeing how busy she was, Young Jo stepped in to lend a hand. After finishing the work, the two went to eat noodles together. But just then, Yoo Kyung called him, asking what he was doing and who he was with. The way she spoke made it sound like she was his girlfriend, which made him very angry. After taking Jung Yun home, he went straight to see Yoo Kyung to ask what exactly she wanted, why she acted jealous when she had previously told him to forget their one-night stand. Yoo Kyung didn't hesitate to admit that she had approached him because she knew he was the chairman's grandson. Moreover, she didn't want him to get involved with Jung Yun, but now she said she regretted it and wished they could be together. Wasn't he also rejected by his own family? So why not build a happy family with her? Yoo Kyung's honeyed words softened Young Jo's heart, and he chose to stay with her. One day on set, Jung Yun saw with her own eyes that Young Jo and a female actress were behaving suspiciously, so she thought the two were dating, and believed the reason Yoo Kyung had stopped her from getting close to him was because he already had a girlfriend. Part of it was because Seo Jin had quarreled with him and left midway through filming. Since the director couldn't find a replacement, he let Jung Yun take her place. In the scene, where a mother reunites with the child she had abandoned years before, the words of remorse spoken by Myung-ja brought both Jung Yun and Yoo Kyung to tears. However, only Jung Yun received Myung-ja's comforting embrace, while her real daughter, Yoo Kyung, was treated like a stranger, which filled her with hatred toward her mother. Immediately afterward, she sent an anonymous letter to the press, accusing actress Myung-ja of abandoning her biological child. Soon, reporters came to meet the director to verify the truth. Of course, he denied all the rumors and even threatened her not to make a big deal out of it. The urgent matter was to find out who had leaked the story. The director suspected it was an inside job and began an internal investigation. However, Yoo Kyung showed no sign of worry at all. What she was curious about was her mother's reaction, how she would feel now that her secret had been exposed. Unexpectedly, Myung-ja showed no trace of panic. Whenever that daughter was mentioned, she remained perfectly composed. The only issue was that she was now suffering from an illness that could cause a tumor in her chest to spread. The doctor advised Myung-ja to undergo surgery as soon as possible, but she kept delaying it, wanting to finish filming before beginning treatment. As for Jung Yun, after all her efforts, she was finally recognized by her superiors. They decided to sign a contract with her, which made her extremely happy. From that moment on, Jung Yun officially became an actress. She immediately ran to tell Yoo Kyung the good news, saying that she would soon become famous and find her mother. Hearing the word mother, Yoo Kyung became furious and scolded Jung Yun for being foolish. Why would she want to find the woman who had abandoned her? She said Jung Yun should take revenge instead. And now, Yoo Kyung had truly taken action. A video was uploaded online, in which someone claimed to be Myung-ja's daughter. Although the person's face was hidden, Jung Yun instantly recognized who it was. It was her younger self, which shocked her so much that she fainted on the spot. This was the very video that Yoo Kyung had filmed for her years ago, but now she had used it to take revenge on her mother. When the director found out, he was furious and rushed to confront Myung-ja, demanding to know her daughter's whereabouts so he could force her to stop, but Myung-ja had no idea where her daughter was. After the foster family moved away, she had completely lost contact with them. The director ordered her to hold a press conference to deny the rumors, but Myung-ja refused. She was filled with regret for abandoning her child and no longer had the strength to do anything. As the media frenzy continued to escalate, the director forced her to go into hiding until the situation calmed down. And at that moment, Jung Yun also realized that the actress was actually actually her friend's mother. What made her most furious was that Yu-kyung had dared to use her image to take revenge on that woman. But Yu-kyung choked up and said, "At first, I studied so hard because I wanted to get into the company where my mother worked, just to meet her. Back then, I imagined hundreds of possible scenarios. But do you know what happened? The business card I gave her, she didn't even look at it and just threw it into her bag. At that moment, I thought that woman must have never once regretted abandoning her child. And yet she could act the role of a mother so perfectly. I will never forgive her, and I will see with my own eyes that she pays the price." Because of Yu-kyung's personal hatred, the film that everyone had worked so hard to complete was now at risk of being permanently cancelled. Jung Yun didn't want that to happen, so she hesitated outside, unable to bring herself to ask the director about it. This scene was seen by both Kang Woo and Young Jo. They comforted her, telling her not to worry, as everyone was trying their best to resolve the issue. But Jung Yun still couldn't feel at ease. She was about to tell Young Jo the truth when Yu-kyung suddenly appeared and interrupted her. If the truth came out now, wouldn't all her efforts go to waste? Yu-kyung wanted Jung Yun to stay silent, because if she spoke up, it wouldn't only affect Yu-kyung, it would also implicate Jung Yun, since the child in the video was her. As Yu-kyung stepped into the main lobby, she happened to see a woman causing a commotion with the security guards, begging to see Myung-ja. Hearing that the woman knew her biological mother, Yu-kyung came forward to help and even offered to drive her to Myung-ja's house. She ended up meeting her own sister-in-law again, but Myung-ja felt no joy, only anger, and immediately ordered the woman to leave. Only Yu-kyung stayed behind to help Myung-ja with everything, even cooking a meal for her. When she finally listened to the woman open up, she learned that Myung-ja had cancer. That was why holding a press conference to clarify the rumors now seemed meaningless. But Myung-ja thought that perhaps when she was gone, that child might finally find peace. Yu-kyung truly wanted to know why her mother had abandoned her years ago. It turned out it was all because she wanted to get back at the man who betrayed her. He had suddenly disappeared without a trace, leaving her alone and pregnant. So out of resentment, she became determined to shine as an actress on screen, hoping he would regret it. But the child had only been taken from her by the company against her will. 10 years later, she finally learned that the man she once loved had been imprisoned and had died there. Now that she had essentially lost her career, she no longer cared about anything. When Yu-kyung asked if she wanted to see her daughter again, the answer was still no, which broke her heart. Meanwhile, because of this scandal, the chairman cancelled the film's release. What he prioritized now was appointing Young Jo as the new director. But there was one condition: if a single cent of the company's money ever went to either Young Jo's mother or his brother, the chairman would take everything back, leaving him with nothing. Han-soo had no idea how ruthless Young Jo's other brother truly was, so he was thrilled to hear that his younger brother had been promoted. He thought that from now on, he would never have to worry about food or money again, and he began using his brother's reputation to build more connections and start his own business. Meanwhile, Jung Yun returned to the orphanage to visit the director. As soon as she arrived, she saw the woman holding a baby in her arms, and beside her was a young student, the child's mother. Jung Yun didn't even need to ask to know why the girl was there. It was clear that another unfortunate child had been born into circumstances like her own. Instead of blaming the girl, Jung Yun comforted her, telling her not to worry, that the baby would surely grow up healthy and beautiful. She also told the director that she had now signed a contract with a company and received many advertising offers. It was truly something to be happy about, proof that the director's years of raising her had not been in vain. After that, she personally went to thank Young Jo, saying that, without him, she would never have reached this point. But simple words of gratitude weren't enough, so Young Jo told her to treat him to a meal, and they agreed to meet that evening. However, he then heard that Yu-kyung was on sick leave, so he went to visit her. Seeing that she was all alone, he stayed to take care of her and lost track of time. At that moment, Jung Yun had just finished shooting a commercial and was eagerly looking forward to dinner with Young Jo. But when she saw that it was Kang Woo who came to pick her up, she felt disappointed. Though they went to dinner together, Jung Yun kept asking about Young Jo. She wanted to know when he had gone abroad to study. When Kang Woo said it was at the beginning of his 3rd year of high school, Jung Yun finally understood why he had suddenly disappeared back then. As for Young Jo, he was still with Yu-kyung, being her support, sharing his dream of building a happy family. But every time he mentioned family, she remained silent. Jung Yun already knew that Kang Woo had feelings for her, but in her heart, she could only think of the boy who had bought her a bowl of noodles that winter long ago. So she decided to turn Kang Woo down. The next day, as soon as Kang Woo met Young Jo, he told him about it. The moment Young Jo heard about the noodle story, along with what Jung Yun had said about her mother, he quickly realized that Jung Yun was the girl he had met 10 years earlier. He was overjoyed and immediately called her. They couldn't wait to see each other again to reminisce about the past, so they arranged to have dinner together. However, just at that time, a colleague discovered that the video store had recovered the original tape used to accuse Myung-ja of abandoning her child. Young-jo remembered seeing a receipt for the tape restoration at Yoo-kyung's house, so he rushed there to find it. The result was even more shocking than he had expected. On the table was a computer with a CD still inside. Young-jo turned it on and watched the entire original video. Seeing that the person in it was Jung Yun, he was completely stunned. At that very moment, Yoo-kyung had just returned from the hospital. She was now pregnant with Young-jo's child, but hadn't yet decided what to do when she saw him sitting at her computer. Yoo-kyung immediately knew that her secret had been exposed, but she still pretended to be innocent and put all the blame on Jung-eun. Yoo-kyung told Young-jo that she had tried to stop Jung-eun from uploading the video online, but Jung-eun wouldn't listen. She even made Young-jo believe that Jung-eun was actually Myung-ja's daughter, and that everything she was doing was out of revenge against her mother. Young-jo was completely at a loss. He was so shocked that he forgot about his dinner appointment with Jung-eun, leaving her waiting endlessly, not knowing when he would show up. Shortly after, Yoo-kyung called Jung-eun to her house and confessed everything that had just happened. Realizing she had been falsely accused, Jung-eun could no longer stay silent. This time, she was determined to expose the truth and tell Young-jo everything. But just as Jung-eun took out her phone, Yoo-kyung stopped her by saying that she was pregnant. If the truth came out now, she would lose everything. So Yoo-kyung begged Jung-eun to take the blame for her. No matter how pitiful Yoo-kyung tried to look, Jung-eun would not be fooled again. She immediately grabbed her and dragged her to see her biological mother to see if she would dare to keep lying in front of her. At that time, the company had organized a press conference to announce that Myung-ja would retire, while she had already been admitted to the hospital to begin cancer treatment. So when the two arrived at her house, they found no one there. Yoo-kyung assumed her mother had left to avoid responsibility, which made her hatred toward her grow even deeper. She told Jung-eun that she had once asked her mother if she wanted to see her daughter again, and the woman had said no. Hearing those words had completely crushed the little hope she had left. At that moment, she truly didn't know what to do. She just wanted to call Young-jo to meet and explain everything, but he didn't answer. Not long after, a group of creditors stormed into the company, causing chaos because Young-jo's brother had used his name to scam them. The incident quickly reached the chairman, who filed a lawsuit against both Han-soo and his business partner, Mi-ryun. Although they were also victims who had been deceived and abandoned by the scammer, their claims lacked evidence, so the police didn't believe them. Afraid of going to jail, Mi-ryun begged Jung Yun for help. Hearing that she was close to Young-jo, Mi-ryun asked her to talk to him and appeal to the chairman. Meanwhile, they were already discussing how to resolve the matter smoothly. The chairman agreed to use company funds to compensate the victims, but regarding Han-soo, he asked Young-jo how to handle him. Young-jo said there was no need to bail him out. This should serve as a lesson. Just as Young-jo left the office, he saw Jung-eun approaching the chairman's office, and when she saw him, she ran away. Young-jo immediately chased after her and found her trembling, hiding in the corner of the room. Now that he saw her again, he was truly furious. Jung-eun had clearly said she came to plead on behalf of Han-soo and Mi-ryun, and even claimed that one of them was related to him by blood. How could she say such things? Because of her, the film and a veteran actress's 25-year career had been completely ruined. The company's finances had also been affected. She once said she wanted to see her mother again. Was this what she did after meeting her? A person like her didn't deserve to be an actress. Every spotlight that had ever shone on her was a waste. As soon as Young-jo finished speaking, he walked away without giving Jung-eun a chance to explain herself. That evening, he had dinner with Yoo-kyung at a luxurious restaurant. She wanted to take the opportunity to tell him that she was pregnant, but couldn't find the right moment. Just as they were about to leave, a phone call interrupted her. His mother had drunk herself unconscious over Han-soo's imprisonment, so her friend called Young-jo to pick her up. After bringing her home, he realized that all these years, his mother hadn't been living comfortably at all. Her small house was cramped and messy, yet she had always insisted she didn't need his money, which broke his heart. When he got home, he ran into Jung-eun, right when he was in his worst mood. But the reason she came wasn't to defend herself, because no matter what she said, Young-jo wouldn't believe her. Jung-eun only wanted him to think about family and bail Han-soo out of jail. After all, they shared the same blood. How could everything end with just one sentence? I don't care. After she left, Young-jo reflected on what she said and decided to release his brother. When Han-soo saw Young-jo come to pick him up personally, he was truly shocked. Finally, his younger brother had accepted him. Overjoyed, Han-soo told Young-jo how he and their mother had been living in hardship all these years. Even the beauty salon wasn't theirs anymore. It only existed in name. Although the brothers had reconciled, it brought serious consequences. Because Young-jo had sold his shares to compensate the victims, according to the original agreement, he would lose his inheritance rights. Before leaving the company, Young-jo wanted to say goodbye to everyone, but they insisted he stay to continue working with them, as production for the new film was about to begin. The female lead, this time, is Jung Yun, which greatly surprised everyone, because she has only just entered the industry. But remembering Young-jo's words, that she was not worthy of being an actress, Jung Yun refused to accept the role, making the director furious and sending her away. The manager ran after her to ask why Jung Yun acted like that. She made up an excuse that she was about to get married and wanted to retire, leaving him stunned. Seeing Jung Yun change so suddenly, Kang-woo really wanted to know the reason, but no matter how much he asked, Jung Yun refused to say anything, making Kang-woo think it was related to Myung-ja's scandal. He went to see his father because years ago he was Myung-ja's manager. Kang-woo thought his father was the one who took the child away from its mother, but the truth was completely different. It was the chairman who arranged everything, and Young-jo's father carried it out for him. These words were overheard by Yoo-kyung, who was eavesdropping outside. Knowing the person behind all her misfortunes, she became filled with hatred toward Young-jo's family, and even wanted to cut off everything related to them, including the child in her womb. But at this moment, Young-jo proposed to Yoo-kyung. Since childhood, he had lacked love, so what Young-jo desired most was a happy family, and he wanted to build that home with Yoo-kyung. Unfortunately, after learning the truth, she could no longer stay by his side. Yoo-kyung said she had approached Young-jo only because he was the heir of the late chairman, but now that he had nothing, their relationship could only end here. Seeing Yoo-kyung leave, Young-jo hurriedly ran after her to stop her, but nothing changed, and she would also quit her job starting tomorrow. Heartbroken after being rejected, he went drinking with his friends. When he got drunk, he still went to Yoo-kyung's house. Young-jo did not believe the words she had just said were sincere, and he was certain Yoo-kyung also had feelings for him, only that she refused to admit it. Afraid that if he continued talking, she would accidentally reveal the secret she had just learned, Yoo-kyung loudly ordered Young-jo to leave. As soon as Young-jo left, she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her abdomen and had to be rushed to the hospital. Yoo-kyung feared she might lose the baby, but fortunately, it was safe. At that time, her pregnancy was almost 3 months along. When the nurse asked her to write the baby's father's name on the record, she refused and immediately went home. After giving up her dream of becoming an actress, Jung Yun moved to another place to live, returning to her busy old life and doing all kinds of work to make a living. Yoo-kyung had completely ended her relationship with Young-jo and decided to raise the child alone, and her belly grew larger each day. 6 months later, Young-jo returned from an overseas trip but had nowhere to stay. The house he used to live in had been sold, so he wanted to stay at his mother's place. However, she was afraid that being associated with her would affect Young-jo, so she kept sending him back to the chairman's house. But since he had been stripped of his inheritance rights, he could no longer return there and had to stay temporarily at Kang-woo's place, where the two began working on a new project together. While looking for a filming location, he happened to see Jung Yun, but instead of being happy to see a familiar face, she hurriedly ran away. After escaping, she realized she had dropped something. When Jung Yun was about to go back to find it, Kang-woo was already there holding it out to her. He really wanted to know how Jung Yun's current life was, but she always changed the subject and pretended that she was doing very well. At that time, Mi-ryun came up to Seoul from the countryside and wanted to meet Jung Yun. Since Jung Yun was hiding the fact that she had quit being an actress, she kept trying to find excuses to avoid her, but Mi-ryun, being observant, quickly realized it. Just then, the scammer from years ago was caught, so Mi-ryun lied to Jung Yun that she was at the police station and got involved in a case, making Jung Yun panic and rush over, only to fall into Mi-ryun's trap. Seeing Jung Yun's current haggard appearance, she couldn't believe an actress could neglect herself like that. By chance, they met Young-jo there. He also came because of the same scammer, so the two finally had a chance to see each other again. But there was nothing left for them to say, so they ended up going separate ways. At present, Young-jo was still pursuing his career in film production and was looking for collaborators. That day, he was shown an excellent script, and below it was the author's name, Yoo-kyung, which reminded him of the happy times they once shared together, without knowing she was carrying his child. During this time, there was no news at all about her mother. Yoo-kyung tried calling her mother's younger brother's house, but they also didn't know where Myung-ja was, and right after she hung up, she felt severe abdominal pain, as a sign that she was about to give birth. Since she was now completely alone, Yoo-kyung had no choice but to call Jung Yun. When she arrived, the baby had already been safely born, but Yoo-kyung didn't want to see her child at all. She hated Young-jo and his entire family, family, so she didn't want the child either, even registering the birth under Jung Yun's name, putting all the responsibility on an innocent person. As soon as she found out about this, Jung Yun was furious. She had endured so much injustice for the mistakes Yu Kyung caused, and now she was even being blamed for abandoning a child. She wanted to know who the baby's father was so she could take the child to meet him, but Yu Kyung lied that she had been betrayed and that the man was already married, so she could not destroy another person's happiness. The next day, Yu Kyung called Jung Yun to the hospital again. She had already finished the paperwork for the baby to be adopted, and all that was left was to take the child to the support center for a family to adopt her. Hearing this, Jung Yun strongly objected, but Yu Kyung tricked her into paying the hospital bill, and while Jung Yun was distracted, she took a taxi and ran away, leaving the newborn baby alone at the hospital. So Jung Yun had no choice but to bring the child to the adoption center for them to complete the procedure. As for Yu Kyung, after abandoning her burden, she received an award for the script she had written. Her career began to flourish, and at that very place, she met the father of her child again. But seeing his face only reminded her of the day she was abandoned. Young Jo's company wanted to collaborate with Yu Kyung, but she refused and planned to go abroad to forget her past. Meanwhile, when his mother found out her son had been stripped of his inheritance rights, she became furious and went to see the chairman, asking him to let Young Jo return to the company. But Young Do hated Young Jo to the core, so there was no way he would ever do that. Mrs. Kim said that the person who should be hated was herself, not Young Jo, because he was just an innocent child. Moreover, if a dispute arose within the family, Young Jo would be the only one to side with his brother. As soon as she stepped outside, she met the director, who was also her former lover. While they were talking, they mentioned Mrs. Myungja, which made Yu Kyung curious, so she secretly listened. Thinking that the woman might know something about her mother, she followed her down to the parking lot to ask directly. It turned out exactly as Mrs. Myungja had once said. The late chairman had arranged everything. The more she heard, the more hatred she felt toward him and Young Jo, so she sold her script to Haeju Company instead of selling it to him. At the same time, Miryun went to see Kang Woo to find out why Jung Eun, an actress, had been neglected so badly, and was shocked to hear that she had cancelled her contract and told everyone she was married. To clarify the matter, Miryun called Jung Eun in so they could talk face to face. When Kang Woo asked the real reason Jung Eun had cancelled her contract, she became agitated, told him not to interfere in her affairs, and left. Unexpectedly, she ran into both Young Jo and Yu Kyung there. They became awkward, unsure whether to greet each other or avoid one another. Young Jo was the one who took the initiative to pull Young Eun away because he had something to ask of her. He was looking for a room to rent, and Jung Eun, with her extensive experience in renting places, was the most reliable person he could turn to. Just then, Young Jo received a call from his brother, so the two of them went to Han Su's place, where Miryun was also present. It had been a long time since they all sat together like this, so the conversation was very lively. To create a chance for Young Jo and Jung Eun to reconcile, Han Su tricked everyone into going to a sauna, but then secretly left with Miryun halfway through. With only the two of them left there, Young Jo felt it was a good opportunity to apologize to Jung Eun. In fact, after scolding her and saying she was not worthy of being an actress, he had always regretted it. He admitted that he had been too angry at the time and couldn't control his words. Jung Yun understood and sympathized with him. Sometime later, So Jin, the daughter of the chairman of a rival company, asked to meet Young Jo. She had always loved him secretly and wanted the two of them to get married. Because the chairman had only one daughter, his entire fortune would one day belong to Young Jo, and he would also be able to stand against the older brother who had cast him aside. During this time, Jung Yun was constantly searching for Myungja's whereabouts. While at the market, she happened to overhear Myungja's sister-in-law talking and learned her address, so she persuaded Yu Kyung to go visit her. The place where Mrs. Myungja was now living was a poor, run-down mountain neighborhood. After spending all her money on medical treatment, she had become penniless. Seeing a once glamorous actress now reduced to such a pitiful state that no one could recognize her, left both Yu Kyung and Jung Eun speechless with shock. Moreover, one of her arms had not yet recovered, making daily life very difficult. Witnessing this heartbreaking scene, Jung Eun hoped her friend could forgive her mother. But no, even though Yu Kyung was moved, the word forgive was not something she could easily say. At least Yu Kyung was able to meet her mother, while Jung Eun was not so lucky. When she heard from the orphanage staff that someone had sent her a letter, she was overjoyed, thinking her mother had come to find her. But it turned out to be from her mother's ex-husband, and her mother had already passed away. During her illness, she had seen a commercial that Jung Eun appeared in, and recognized her. The mother deeply regretted not being able to apologize to Jung Jung-un, so her ex-husband did it on her behalf. He also showed her a photo of her mother, and finally seeing her mother's face made Jung-un burst into tears. After all the hardships she had been through, Jung-un didn't want anyone else to experience the same misfortune, so she went back to the orphanage to complete the adoption procedure for Yu Kyung's child. Then she took the baby to meet her grandmother. Jung-un said this was Mrs. Lee's biological grandchild, which made the woman panic and try to send her away. But when she saw the baby's face, identical to her own daughter's when she was born, she immediately held the child tightly and cried in anguish. After calming down, she asked Jung-un if she was her daughter, but Jung-un denied it. She didn't reveal any information about Yu Kyung either. She only wanted her friend to know that her daughter's child was now being raised by the grandmother. Upon learning this, Yu Kyung became furious and scolded Jung-un for interfering in her affairs. Soon, that child would have been adopted by someone else, but Jung-un had ruined everything. The reason Jung-un did it was simply that she didn't want an innocent child to be abandoned by her birth mother like she and Yu Kyung had been. If Yu Kyung could not forgive her mother and raise her own child, then Jung-un would do it instead, accepting to take Yu Kyung's place as the daughter of that woman. At that moment, from inside her bag, the old woman found hospital documents stating that Jung-un was the baby's mother. When Jung-un returned, the woman angrily threw them in her face and demanded to know whether it was true. Realizing the woman had mistaken her for her biological daughter, Jung-un no longer wanted to deny it. She simply nodded, confirming that it was true. Mrs. Myung-ja was overwhelmed with emotion, blaming herself for not recognizing her daughter sooner. But now, none of that mattered anymore, because today would be the day she fulfilled her duty as a mother to her child. From that day on, the two lived together like real family and cared for the baby. To cover living expenses, Jung-un worked tirelessly, day and night. Seeing how hard she worked, Kang-woo came to help her. He did everything out of the affection he had for Jung-un, even though she always rejected him. When he escorted Jung-un home, she told him she had an elderly mother and a child to take care of. But he didn't believe her and thought she said that only to turn him down. On the chairman's side, he colluded with the director to completely destroy Young-jo's career, making it impossible for him to rise again. Because of this, he went to Young-jo's superior and conspired to have him fired. When Young-jo was dismissed without any reason, he was shocked but helpless. The news quickly reached Yu Kyung. With her intelligence, she knew for sure that Young-jo's brother was behind it and became very worried. She thought Young-jo should have stayed abroad and never returned. Why did he stubbornly insist on producing films? He openly admitted that everything he did was because he loved Yu Kyung. Since she loved cinema, he was willing to do anything for her. At the same time, Han-soo suddenly received a wedding invitation from Mi-ryun. Just recently, they had been close, so hearing she was getting married left him stunned. He immediately confronted her to ask what was going on, but Mi-ryun frankly told him that they were just friends. He had never even proposed to her, so he had no right to complain. Rejected so bluntly, Han-soo could only go home and vent to his mother. Meanwhile, she had an appointment with an old acquaintance and went out. That acquaintance was Mrs. Myung-ja's younger brother. From him, she learned that Young-jo had been stripped of his inheritance and that the once wealthy heir was now wandering without a home. Recalling how, before his death, the chairman had come to see him to arrange certain matters, he realized the chairman had already anticipated that after his death, Young-jo would lose everything and even be dragged down by his mother and brother. It was all part of the plan, to make him experience complete loss so he could understand the true value of money. It was now time for Mr. Lee to tell Young-jo the truth, so he called him over to meet. The fabric shop that had been maintained for so many years actually belonged to Young-jo's grandfather, and now it would be his. Years ago, the late chairman had started his business there and became wealthy, so Mr. Lee believed his grandson could do the same. However, since Young-jo had no knowledge of the fashion industry, he was quite worried. Later, he went to his usual noodle stall to eat, and happened to run into Jung-un. It turned out the store where she worked was nearby. The two went drinking together, and in his drunken state, Young-jo opened up about his feelings. Even now, he still hadn't forgotten Yu Kyung, and continued to suffer deeply. Jung-un understood that feeling well because the man she secretly liked was right in front of her, yet she couldn't say a word. At that moment, Seo-jin called Young-jo, but he was very drunk, so Jung-un asked Seo-jin to take him home. Unexpectedly, she took him to a hotel instead, and had the staff secretly take photos of their intimate moment. It was no surprise that the next day, the news exploded, becoming a huge scandal that affected both companies, and enraged Seo-jin's father, who summoned them to discuss a solution. Meanwhile, Young-do told them that Young-jo no longer had any connection to the corporation, so even if Seo-jin married him, it would be meaningless. Therefore, they would clarify to the media that it was merely a scene filmed on a movie set, and with that, the matter was considered closed. After everyone left, Young-do told his younger brother that the reason he had been fired was because of director Oh. If Young-jo continued to stay here, it would not be good for him. Therefore, Young-do decided to give Young-jo a sum of money sufficient for him to live comfortably in New York. But before leaving, Young-jo still wanted to visit his mother and brother to say goodbye, because no matter what, they were his family. The ring he had once intended to use to propose to Yoo Kyung, he now gave to his mother so she could pass it on to his future sister-in-law. At this moment, the misunderstandings between mother and son were finally resolved, allowing him to leave for another country with peace of mind. Yoo Kyung also had plans to go abroad, and today was the day of her departure. But before leaving the country, she stopped by her biological mother's house to see her one last time, and asked why she had abandoned her years ago. Yet even her mother couldn't give a clear answer. It had all been out of helplessness. As Yoo Kyung turned to leave, she suddenly heard the sound of her child crying, which made her waver. Jung Yun sincerely urged her that it was still not too late to turn back. Yoo Kyung could have had a happy family, but she had been too stubborn to realize it. However, no matter what Jung Yun said, she couldn't change Yoo Kyung's mind. Once she decided to leave, she would never return. By coincidence, at the airport, Yoo Kyung met one of the director's men, and learned that he was looking for Young-jo. She then discovered that Young-jo had been transferred to the United States, and that this man had been assigned to monitor him. Only after personally witnessing Young-jo pass through immigration did the man call back to report to the director. At the same time, Kang-woo told Jung-eun that Young-jo was leaving for America today. Just yesterday they had met, yet he hadn't told her anything, leaving Jung-eun completely shocked. At that time, as Young-jo was preparing to board his flight, he suddenly tore up his ticket. He had wanted to stay because of Yoo Kyung, but she had already told him the reason they had to end things. It was because his father and grandfather had committed sins, so he had to bear the consequences. Young-jo was confused about what this had to do with him, but she refused to explain. If he wanted revenge, she told him to become successful enough to make her regret it. They parted in such a cruel way. Meanwhile, their child fell ill due to the harsh weather. The shabby, impoverished house was no longer suitable for the baby, so Mrs. Lee decided to return to her younger brother for help. Years ago, she had stolen his money to give to the woman who raised Yoo Kyung, and since then, the two had been estranged for 25 years. Yet her brother bore no grudge. He even cleaned a room to welcome her. The moment they returned, the whole family warmly greeted them. Everyone was worried when they saw Mrs. Lee's frail and aged appearance, and her sister-in-law cried in sympathy upon realizing how much her illness had worn her down. Still, being reunited after more than 20 years was a blessing. Mrs. Lee had never imagined she would be able to return to this house and feel the warmth of family again. Now she was deeply grateful to Jung-eun for finding her. Otherwise, she might have died alone. However, Jung-eun couldn't stay with her. In the middle of the night, she quietly left without anyone noticing. In the morning, when everyone noticed Jung-eun hadn't woken up, they went to her room and discovered she was gone. As soon as they left, the sister-in-law began complaining. The family's financial situation was already difficult, and now Mrs. Lee had brought a child along, making things even more awkward. Mrs. Lee understood what her sister-in-law meant, but could only stay silent and endure it. Then, suddenly, Jung-eun appeared again. She had changed her mind and decided to treat Mrs. Lee as her own mother. Of course, Jung-eun didn't forget to give money to the sister-in-law so that she would allow them to stay. This matter was kept secret from her husband, or he would have been furious. While out walking, Jung-eun passed by the place where she used to meet Young-jo. She thought he had already gone abroad, but to her surprise, she saw him right ahead and ran after him with all her strength, only to lose sight of him. In fact, Young-jo had never gone to America. It was only a plan to deceive the director. After that, he returned with Mr. Lee to discuss what to do next. For years, Mr. Lee had managed many fashion stores on behalf of the late chairman, without the family's knowledge, and now all of them would be transferred to Young-jo's name. However, the director learned that Young-jo hadn't gone overseas and was likely hiding somewhere. Knowing that Young-jo was close to his son, he ordered Kang-woo to extract information from him. But unlike his father, Kang-woo was not someone who would betray a friend, so he firmly refused to help. At this time, Young-jo was brought to live in Mr. Lee's house, under the guise of a hired worker. Every day, he had to work hard, and was looked down upon by Mr. Lee's son, because of his weak physical condition and lack of experience in manual labor. Having to live under the same roof and see Young-jo every day made Jung-eun feel extremely awkward, as she was known as a single mother. During this time, many reports spread, claiming that Seo-jin had abandoned Young-jo because he had lost his inheritance. Reporters crowded outside the beauty clinic, waiting to catch news. As Seo-jin was inside getting treatments, Despite all the ongoing scandals, when she met Youngjo's mother, Seo-jin remained polite and respectful. Moreover, Mrs. Kim did not ask anything about her relationship with her son. That same day, Director Oh personally came to meet Mrs. Kim, of course to ask about Youngjo's whereabouts. But even his mother didn't know. She still believed he had gone abroad. Meanwhile, Youngjo was living peacefully at Mr. Lee's house. Everyone treated him like family, and they often gathered together to care for the child. From the very first time Youngjo saw the baby, he felt a strange sense of closeness. He lovingly held the child in his arms, unaware that it was his own. The secret about the child's mother remained hidden until one day, Mrs. Lee happened to see Jung Yun holding a photo of a woman and curiously asked who she was. Jung Yun became emotional, unable to hold back her tears, which made Mrs. Lee even more eager to know the truth. Not being good at lying, and unwilling to deny the mother who had just passed away, Jung Yun honestly told Mrs. Lee that the woman in the photo was her real mother, and that Yoo-kyung was actually Mrs. Lee's biological daughter. The shock was overwhelming. Mrs. Lee suddenly remembered when Yoo-kyung once asked if she wanted to meet her lost daughter, and she had heartlessly answered no. Now that memory filled her with guilt and regret. But since the truth was finally revealed, Mrs. Lee told Jung Yun there was no reason for her to stay any longer. She wanted Jung Yun to leave this place and take her savings to live a free and happy life. But Jung Yun knelt down and begged to stay. She had no family, no relatives, and had always been alone, so she longed deeply for the warmth of a family. Since living there, Jung Yun had felt it was the happiest time of her life, so she pleaded to be allowed to stay. Learning about Jung Yun's situation, Mrs. Lee couldn't bring herself to drive her away, so they continued living together as mother and daughter. When her sister-in-law later spoke of Jung Yun as someone who must have been poorly raised to become a single mother, Mrs. Lee grew angry and sternly reminded her to watch her words. Now, Myung-ja truly cherished her and wanted Jung Yun to return to acting. Around this time, Han-soo finally found a decent job after years of wandering, which made his mother so happy that she went out drinking with friends. Unexpectedly, at the market, she saw Youngjo carrying rolls of fabric on his shoulder. Realizing her son was working there, she pretended not to know him to avoid alerting the director's men. Meanwhile, his older brother had joined Haeju Company. On his very first day, he greeted everyone warmly and even brought small gifts. Hearing that these people had once worked with Mrs. Lee and Jung Yun, he curiously asked if they knew where the two were, since both had disappeared. When Kang Woo overheard this, he was shocked. As soon as work ended, he immediately went to the mountain townhouse to find Jung Yun. At that time, Jung Yun was working as an extra for a film crew to earn some extra living expenses, while Youngjo was diligently learning the trade at the clothing shop. That day, after receiving a small tip from a customer, he used it to buy a gift for Jung Yun, a toy for her daughter. He even wanted to invite Jung Yun to eat noodles, but unfortunately, he didn't have any money left. Yet even that small gesture was enough to make Jung Yun feel very happy. At home, the sister-in-law tried to deceive Jung Yun by inflating living costs to take her money. When her son found out, he told his father, who got angry and scolded his wife loudly until she fell silent. When Youngjo asked for another bowl of rice, the sister-in-law scolded him harshly, making him stop talking. Only Jung Yun quietly went to get more rice for him. The relationship between them gradually grew closer, to the point that Youngjo would always ask Jung Yun to help apply pain relief patches on his back after work. Just like that, another 6 years passed. The child had grown up healthy and strong, surrounded by the family's love, and was named Handy. The bond between Handy and Youngjo was extremely close, no different from that of a father and daughter. Handy even ordered a gift online for him, a suit from the very fashion brand he had founded. Throughout those 6 years, Youngjo's older brother had no news of him and was increasingly worried, venting his anger on the director and ordering him to find his younger brother at all costs. Meanwhile, Youngjo, Jung Yun, and Handy went to the beach together at the little girl's request. This beach was the same place where Jung Yun had once received news from her mother. Remembering it now, her emotions were just as vivid as before, except that this time, she had found true happiness with her daughter and the man she loved. While everyone was happily eating together, Youngjo received a call from an important business partner who had just returned from abroad and needed to meet him immediately. Since it was a major deal, Youngjo had to rush out to see him. He took Jung Yun and Handy to the airport, telling them to wait there while he went ahead. Coincidentally, Kang Woo was also there on business and happened to see Jung Yun. Even after all these years, he still recognized her and hurried to follow. He searched everywhere but lost sight of her. At that moment, Jung Yun was at the counter buying ice cream for her daughter. When she turned back, she saw the little girl standing next to a woman, none other than Yoo-kyung, Handy's biological mother. Jung Yun was so terrified that she didn't dare make a sound, afraid Yoo-kyung would recognize Handy, so she quickly hid nearby. She only dared to approach her daughter after Yoo-kyung left, Even though the woman was gone, Jung Yun still wasn't at ease, and pulled the girl into the restroom to hide. Her whole body trembled with fear, terrified that Yoo Kyung might return and take away the child she had raised with such hardship. Even after they got home, Jung Yun couldn't calm down. Seeing her like that, Mrs. Lee questioned her and learned that Yoo Kyung had returned. Now Mrs. Lee understood why Jung Yun was so agitated. But so what if Yoo Kyung had come back? Jung Yun was now Handy's real mother. The woman who had abandoned her child long ago no longer had any right. Moreover, Yoo Kyung had probably already forgotten her daughter's existence. She returned from abroad after achieving success through several famous film projects and was invited for interviews. Her career was now thriving, while Jung Yun was just a small-time actress with little recognition. At night, Jung Yun would wake up in fear, haunted by dreams of Yoo Kyung coming to take her child away. The following year, Handy reached school age, and her grandmother advised Jung Yun to get married soon so the girl could have a father and not be looked down upon by her classmates. Even the sister-in-law agreed and told Young Jo he should move out so as not to interfere with Jung Eun meeting another man. Since the family had spoken up, Jung Yun could only ask him to move out. After all, Young Jo had become wealthy, and it would be unfair for him to keep living in a basement. Meanwhile, Kang Woo happened to see a scene from a film Jung Eun was in and immediately recognized her. He contacted the film crew and quickly drove there. Seeing Jung Eun acting in a supporting role, lying in a dirty, smelly puddle for over an hour in the freezing weather, he felt deep distress and immediately scolded the staff for treating an extra that way. If she falls ill, who will take responsibility? They only looked for excuses to avoid blame and completely ignored people like Jung Eun. As soon as the scene ended, he immediately pulled Jung Eun into his car, covered her with extra clothes, and hurried off to find something dry for her to change into. After 6 years apart, her life hadn't improved much, which left him deeply disappointed. If she had cut off contact with him, then at least she should have been living happily. But seeing her like this broke his heart. Now that he had found her again, Kang Woo was determined not to let her go. Unexpectedly, he discovered that his long-lost friend of 6 years had also appeared there. Seeing Young Jo come to pick Jung Eun up, Kang Woo realized that the two had been in contact all along, which made him angry and hurt, feeling as if Young Jo had never truly considered him a friend. However, after they finally sat down to talk, the misunderstanding was cleared up, and he learned that Jung Eun was Myung-ja's daughter, the same person who had released that video. But Kang Woo didn't believe it was true. He thought it was fabricated and completely trusted Jung Eun. Meanwhile, Mrs. Lee already regarded Young Jo as her son-in-law and sincerely hoped he and Jung Eun would become a couple. Only Jung Eun didn't know how to tell her mother the truth. Even now, she still didn't have enough confidence to take that next step with him. Her friend Mi Ryun was also in Seoul at the time, searching for Jung Eun. She had recently divorced and needed someone to confide in. By coincidence, she ran into Han Soo after 6 years. Now he held a managerial position at a company and was recruiting talented actors. Seeing Mi Ryun again filled him with joy, but out of pride, he lied that he was already married and had a child, which made her feel insecure and hide the fact that she had just divorced. Meanwhile, Young Jo returned home to visit his mother. Though she didn't show it outwardly, she was truly happy and personally cooked a full meal for her son. Now that his career was stable, she wanted Young Jo to settle down. She had kept the ring from years ago, hoping he would one day give it to his bride. Late that night, Han Soo came home exhausted after a long day. When he lay down, he sensed someone else there, panicked, and turned on the light, only to find his long-lost younger brother. Finally, after so many years, they were reunited. Overjoyed, Han Soo jumped onto the bed and hugged Young Jo playfully. On the other side, Kang Woo's team was working on a major film project with a huge investment, but Seo Jin arrogantly refused the lead role, leaving them unsure of whom to cast. Kang Woo immediately recommended Jung Eun. In his eyes, no one suited the role better than she did. Despite strong opposition from Yoo Kyung, Kang Woo didn't care. This was his chance to help the woman he loved. He then brought the script directly to the film set, handed it to Jung Eun, and persuaded her to audition for the role. He was certain that after reading the script, Jung Yun would agree to take the role. It was a film about a struggling mother who did everything she could to raise her child, a story that mirrored Jung Yun's own past, so she decided to audition. When she shared this with Young Jo, he fully supported her. Moreover, since the next day would be the day he had to move out, before leaving, he wanted to confess his invasion feelings to Jung Eun, hoping they could start over together. His sudden confession left her unable to respond right away. She told him to meet her next Thursday at 5 o'clock at the place where they had made a promise 16 years ago. At that time, she she would give him her answer. The next thing Young Jo needed to do was return to the company to meet his older brother. He wanted Young Do to know that he had been living well all these years and now had his own brand. At first, his brother seemed pleased, but when he learned that their grandfather had given Young Jo the clothing shop, he flew into a rage and smashed things in anger. Young Do couldn't believe that even after their grandfather's death, he was still looking out for Young Jo. It turned out that, in their grandfather's eyes, there had never been a place for him. At the same time, Jung Yun went to the company for her audition. She performed exceptionally well and was hopeful she would get the lead role. But suddenly, Yoo Kyung appeared and coldly told her that she wouldn't be chosen. After so many years, this was the first time they had met again. Yet instead of greeting her, Yoo Kyung only wanted to dig into Jung Yun's painful past, labeling her as the daughter of the actress Myung Ja. That was the reason she was rejected for the role, because the production team feared that if the past came to light, it would affect the film. Jung Yun had nothing left to say. As she stood up to leave, Yoo Kyung suddenly asked about the child and the mother she had abandoned. Jung Yun replied that she didn't know where they were anymore. Life had been too hard, so she had given up on them long ago. Finishing those words, she quickly walked away, but her unsteady steps made Yoo Kyung suspicious. Young Jo arrived just as Jung Yun was leaving, and didn't even have a chance to call her before she got into a taxi, giving him the opportunity to face his former lover again. Now that they met, there was no nostalgia, only sarcasm. Yoo Kyung had thought that Young Jo would become successful just to take revenge on her, but upon hearing he was only running a clothing shop, she looked down on him with disdain. Of course, Young Jo was no stranger to her attitude, and had no interest in explaining the true extent of his wealth. He only wanted to show Yoo Kyung that he was no longer the man who once begged for her love. Jung Yun had already returned home, and told everyone that she had failed the audition, which puzzled her mother. With Jung Yun's acting talent, how could she not be chosen? Moreover, the script had been written by Kang Woo specifically for her. Jung Yun then explained that Yoo Kyung had rejected her, and even if she had been chosen, she wouldn't have had the confidence to face that woman. Every time Yoo Kyung mentioned her mother and daughter, it terrified Jung Yun, leaving her with no choice but to avoid her. However, Kang Woo was determined for Jung Yun to play the lead role. His disagreement with Yoo Kyung led to a fierce argument. Since they couldn't reach a consensus, they decided to let the investors choose who would be the female lead. Meanwhile, Jung Yun became so absorbed in housework that she completely forgot her important meeting with Young Jo, leaving him waiting for hours. Only after a long while did she remember, and in panic, she rushed to get her phone to call and apologize. Instead of being upset, Young Jo told her to join him for dinner, but she was too busy with housework to go. In the end, Young Jo decided to go find her himself. He brought along a bouquet of flowers for the woman he loved, hoping to finally hear her answer. After all his hopes, Jung Yun still turned down the idea of them being together because she had no confidence in herself. She had nothing, and was a single mother. How could she ever deserve him? But Young Jo didn't care about any of that. He truly loved Jung Yun, and wanted her to believe in herself, assuring her that one day her acting career would shine brightly. Thanks to Young Jo's encouragement, Jung Yun became more confident, no longer afraid to face Yoo Kyung, and she resolved to become a famous actress. That day, when another actress had an accident and couldn't film, the director had to find an immediate replacement. Jung Yun was chosen, and she performed exceptionally well. When the film was released, Mir-Yoon saw her friend on TV and immediately rushed to the filming site to find Jung Yun. The two were overjoyed to see each other again, laughing and unable to hide their excitement. Right after that, Jung Yun took Mir-Yoon home and introduced her to her daughter and mother. Meanwhile, Young Jo had just received a large order, so he and his employees worked overtime day and night to meet the deadline. At the same time, Jung Yun's acting career continued to flourish, and she gradually became a well-known name. Because of this, Kang Woo worked hard to convince the investors that Jung Yun was the perfect and most promising face for the role. They all agreed with his opinion. Everything seemed to be going smoothly until Yoo Kyung once again interfered. She called the investors to delay the decision and told Kang Woo that if she couldn't find another actress within 4 days, then he could cast Jung Yun. During that time, she continuously followed Mrs. Myung Ja's hospital schedule. After the older woman's appointment, Yoo Kyung quietly tailed her the entire way without being noticed. It wasn't until Mrs. Lee saw her reflection in a glass window that she realized she was being followed. Shocked, she hurriedly ran to escape from Yoo Kyung. Passing by a park, she suddenly heard her granddaughter calling out to her. Mrs. Lee quickly ran over, picked up the little girl, told her to stay silent, and rushed to hide. Just as they slipped behind a gate, Yoo Kyung arrived but couldn't find them, and eventually left in another direction. Even after Yoo Kyung had gone, Mrs. Lee still felt uneasy, and continued running home. As for Yoo Kyung, after losing sight of her mother, she became very disappointed. Having no one else to confide in, she called Jung Yun, and admitted that ever since returning to Korea, she had been tracking her mother's medical appointments. Seeing her mother now happy and healthy left Yoo Kyung conflicted. not knowing whether to feel relieved or sorrowful. There was one thing, however, that Yoo-kyung had still kept secret from Jung Yun: the truth about the child's father. He wasn't a married man, as she had once claimed. Hearing this, Jung Yun was shocked and wanted to know who that man was, but Yoo-kyung refused to reveal it, so she ended up staying there the entire night. Early the next morning, while Jung Yun went to the bathroom, Yoo-kyung grew curious and picked up her phone. She discovered many family photos stored inside, all of them pictures of Jung Yun's daughter and mother. That was when Yoo-kyung realized Jung Yun had been lying to her all along. Clearly, she had been living with them but claimed she didn't know their whereabouts. Just then, Jung Yun came out of the bathroom, startling Yoo-kyung. She quickly lied, saying she saw a message pop up and only picked up the phone to hand it to her. Jung Yun was secretly terrified that her secret might be exposed but tried to stay calm, finding an excuse to leave, unaware that she was already being followed. Yoo-kyung tailed her all the way home and finally learned where she lived. It meant the day she would reunite with her daughter was not far away. Meanwhile, Jung Yun took the opportunity to buy a new phone and set a password so that no one could touch it again. Young Jo even helped her transfer her photos and contacts. Taking advantage of the moment, he suggested they take a picture together as a memory, and while she wasn't paying attention, he kissed her on the cheek, making Jung Yun blush shyly. Since Jung Yun now had some public recognition, Yoon became her manager. They also had to be careful not to mention sensitive topics related to Mrs. Lee or her daughter to avoid attracting media attention. At that time, Yoo-kyung went to the park to watch the children playing. After all, she was a mother, and every time she saw children, she couldn't help but think of her own daughter. Suddenly, a little girl came up to her. It was her biological daughter. The child cheerfully smiled at Yoo-kyung and recognized her, saying they had met once at the airport. Yoo-kyung had followed Handy all the way home. Seeing that both the little girl and her grandmother were living happily, Yoo-kyung burst into tears of joy, just knowing that was enough to make her feel content. Meanwhile, at the filming set, So-jin grew jealous after learning that the media had recently begun paying attention to Jung-eun. Out of spite, she deliberately wore the exact same dress and forced Jung-eun to change. Since Jung-eun didn't have her own stylist, she struggled to find something else to wear, hurriedly changed, and ran back to the set, arriving late, only to be scolded again by So-jin. During the shoot, So-jin took advantage of the scene to slap Jung-eun hard across the face for real. Although it hurt, Jung-eun endured it without complaint. Still, that wasn't enough to satisfy So-jin. Yoo-kyung used this situation to manipulate her into accepting the lead role in her own film. In front of So-jin, she constantly praised Jung-eun's acting, and even showed her the audition video, which only fueled So-jin's jealousy. When reporters came to interview her, So-jin publicly announced that she would take the female lead role, ensuring that the news would spread quickly. As a result, no matter how much Kang-woo supported her, Jung-eun could do nothing to change the situation. Although this was orchestrated entirely by Yoo-kyung, she claimed it wasn't out of personal resentment but simply business. Yoo-kyung told Jung-eun that she had invested heavily in the film and couldn't entrust it to a newly rising actress like her. Before long, Kang-woo heard the news and came to comfort Jung-eun. After all, So-jin had struggled to secure that role. Since most of the investors preferred Jung-eun's acting, the only thing she lacked was fame. Thanks to Kang-woo's recognition of her talent, Jung-eun no longer felt sad. Meanwhile, Yoo-kyung met with the vice director of Haeju and cleverly trapped him into revealing that director Oh had been embezzling company funds for personal gain. She secretly recorded the entire conversation. Around the same time, Haeju company canceled its large order from Young-jo, claiming the products were of poor quality and refusing to buy them. Previously, due to the urgent delivery schedule, his company had spent significant money and manpower to meet the deadline, so the sudden cancellation caused huge losses for Young-jo. From the start, it had been a trap set by Young-do to destroy his younger brother. Out of jealousy that Young-jo had always been supported by their grandfather and was once considered for control of the company, Young-do resorted to this scheme. Still, this didn't break Young-jo's spirit, though he was deeply disappointed to learn that the person he had respected so much could be so despicable. At home, everyone heard the news that Young-jo had been deceived by his brother. They all felt sorry for him but didn't know how to help. The matter soon reached his mother, who gathered all her savings and went to Mrs. Lee's house, asking her to secretly give the money to Young-jo without telling him it came from her. That evening, when Young-jo returned home, exhausted, he was greeted by a warm family dinner, a gesture that gave him great comfort and encouragement. Mrs. Lee specifically called Young-jo into her room and handed him the envelope, telling him it was from his mother because she thought knowing that would bring him comfort. All the documents for his uncle's stores had now been transferred under his name. Everyone was supporting Young-jo, so he must not give up. Jung-eun also understood that this was the time she needed to be by his side and encourage him. That night, the two of them went to the Han River to admire the view. Gathering all her courage, Jung-eun placed a gentle kiss on Young-jo's lips to express her feelings, hoping it would lift his spirit spirits. Not long after, his subordinates reported that Haeju's people wanted to buy back the fabric at half price. However, young Jo firmly refused to sell it at a loss, despite objections from his partners, and ended up paying them out of his own pocket. Meanwhile, a designer, collaborating with Haeju, became furious upon learning that her designs wouldn't be produced because there was no fabric available. At that moment, young Jo went to meet her to negotiate. Around the same time, Mrs. Lee heard her granddaughter talk about a woman she had met at the nearby park. Following her intuition, she quickly realized that the woman could only be Yu Kyung. Staying silent and hiding was no longer an option, so she decided to confront her. When they met, Mrs. Lee greeted her cheerfully, as if they were old acquaintances reuniting, but her words subtly warned Yu Kyung not to approach her granddaughter again. A mother who once abandoned her child had no right anymore. After saying those words, Mrs. Lee turned and left before Yu Kyung could see how emotional she had become. It took all her strength to hide her feelings in front of Yu Kyung, but those very words made Yu Kyung realize that Mrs. Lee had known she was her biological daughter all along. Who else but Jung Yun could have revealed that secret? She immediately called Jung Yun and arranged to meet at her house. When Jung Yun hurried back home, Yu Kyung was already waiting in front of the gate. She said this was not the first time she had come here, but the third. She had even met Handy. Jung Yun was still in shock when the child came home from school. Jung Yun hugged the little girl in front of Yu Kyung and said this was her daughter, making her realize that she was no longer worthy of being the child's mother. She even warned Yu Kyung not to come and disturb her family again. There was no place for her here. Anyone who destroyed her mother's career and abandoned her newborn child did not deserve to see them again. After being threatened by Jung Yun, Yu Kyung lost her composure and accidentally hit the car in front of her. Unfortunately for her, they were gangsters who wanted to make a big deal out of it. As soon as they met Yu Kyung, they began to give her a hard time, which frightened her greatly. At that moment, young Jo happened to drive by, and seeing Yu Kyung being harassed, stepped in to help her out. Afterward, he drove her home, but she refused all help from Young Jo. They had already broken up, so she did not want to have anything to do with him. So that Jung Yun would not misunderstand, Young Jo told her that he already had a girlfriend. Moreover, he intended to take Jung Yun home to meet his family, and informed her in advance so she could prepare. The next day was the final day of filming. However, while Mi-Roon was doing Jung Yun's makeup, she accidentally mentioned that Jung Yun had a 6-year-old child, and unfortunately, the assistant of Seo-jin overheard it. She quickly ran to tell Seo-jin about it. The rival she had always hated turned out to have a child even before marriage. This would definitely be a sensational story for the media. So, right in front of everyone, Seo-jin publicly accused Jung Yun of having a child, even though she was not married yet, leaving everyone in shock. When Han-soo heard the news, he immediately informed Kang-woo. Yu Kyung was also there, so she heard everything. Now they were all worried that Jung Yun's career would end here, just when she was starting to shine. Before the press conference, Yu Kyung went to see Jung Yun because she was curious to know whether Jung Yun dared to face the truth. Even she herself did not have the courage to reveal that she was the child's mother. Unexpectedly, Jung Yun was that strong. In front of the reporters, she admitted that she had a child even before marriage. They all asked why she had hidden it for so long. Jung Yun replied, "Everything I did was for my child. I am just a small supporting actress, but in my child's eyes, her mother is a star. The reason I didn't make it public was because I wanted to protect her. People can treat me however they want, but please don't hurt my child." The heart of a mother like Jung Yun moved everyone there. Even Yu Kyung could not hold back her tears. She felt deeply ashamed of herself for never once doing anything for her own child, while Jung Yun had done everything for the little girl. After that, the article was still published, but Jung Yun's name was kept secret. Although it was not mentioned directly, her career was greatly affected. Mi-Ryun knew it was all her fault, so she felt very guilty. However, she couldn't help but wonder why Yu Kyung always made things difficult for Jung Yun. And even during the press conference, she didn't seem shaken at all. Coincidentally, the mother outside overheard everything, so she decided to visit Yu Kyung. At that time, Yu Kyung had just woken up when she heard the doorbell ring. Seeing that the person outside was her mother, she was completely shocked and didn't know what to do, hurriedly fixing her hair before daring to open the door. Her mother greeted her with a bright smile, stepped inside, and looked at the messy kitchen. She knew that her daughter hadn't cooked in a long time and only ate out, so she brought porridge she had made herself for. Yu Kyung told her to eat it while it was still warm, and asked if there was anything Yu Kyung wanted to say to her, but she said nothing at all. Even though no words were spoken, both of them silently understood that the other was family. It's all right even if you don't say anything. It's enough that both you and I know. Don't keep looking back at the past anymore. Live well and and don't let yourself fall ill. Do you understand what I'm saying? Although they did not address each other as mother and daughter, Yoo Kyung clearly understood that her mother was giving her advice, so she couldn't hold back her tears, and nodded. As for Jung Yun, after the truth about her having a child was revealed, no one shunned her. On the contrary, they wanted to help her by giving her more acting roles. Meanwhile, after discussing with the designer, Young Jo decided to invest once again and find new partners. If it succeeded, all would be well, but if it failed, Young Jo would be burdened with a 5 billion won debt, while the other man would lose his company. However, they still wanted to try, believing this might be their chance to bring their brand to the market. So, Young Jo quickly began working. At that time, Yoo Kyung received an invitation to attend a film festival in the United States, so she was preparing to leave. She went to the office to say goodbye to everyone before heading to the airport, and there, she saw child actors coming in for auditions. Every time she saw those innocent children, it reminded her of her own daughter. At this moment, Young Jo was preparing to introduce his girlfriend to his mother. However, after hearing from Han-soo and her friends that Jung Yun was a single mother who had a 6-year-old child without being married, she became furious and immediately called the two of them home to meet her. Although Jung Eun appeared gentle and beautiful, she was a mother. The woman did not want her son to marry someone who already had a child, so she asked Jung Eun to give up the idea of being with Young Jo. Just then, Han-soo arrived with Handy. Knowing that his mother would object, he wanted to use the child's adorableness to persuade her. As soon as Handy entered the house, she ran to hug her grandmother, making it impossible for the older woman to turn away from such a lovely granddaughter. Not long after, Jung Eun and Young Jo's engagement ceremony was held. That same day, Yoo Kyung returned from abroad. When she arrived at the company and saw no one there, she curiously called Kang Woo and learned that everyone was at Young Jo's engagement ceremony. Although Yoo Kyung was shocked, she had no intention of stopping them. She only wanted to tidy up the office but accidentally found a card on Kang Woo's desk. It was a handwritten invitation from Handy, inviting him to attend her mother's engagement ceremony. Realizing that the woman Young Jo was marrying was Jung Yun, Yoo Kyung was extremely shocked. She was determined not to let the two of them be together, so she rushed to find Young Jo. Yoo Kyung, now completely emotional, forced him to stop the ceremony, which made Young Jo furious. The two of them had clearly ended things, so she had no right to interfere. At that moment, Jung Eun was on her way to bring him the boutonniere when she happened to see them arguing. Now she finally knew that Young Jo was Yoo Kyung's ex-boyfriend, and she burst into tears, feeling as if every word they spoke cut deeply into her heart. Afraid that their argument would be overheard, Young Jo immediately grabbed Yoo Kyung's hand and pulled her to another place. At that moment, Kang Woo had seen everything. He also noticed Jung Eun sitting alone in pain nearby, and not wanting her to suffer anymore, he asked if she wanted to leave. If she did, Kang Woo would definitely take her away. Since she no longer cared about anything, she left with him. On the other side, Young Jo did not want to get entangled with his ex anymore. 6 years had passed, and of course, everyone had the right to seek their own happiness. As for Yoo Kyung, she could accept him loving anyone except Jung Eun. She really wanted to know when the two of them had started being together. He and Jung Eun had been living together for the past 6 years with Aunt Myung-ja and Handy. Maybe in your eyes I'm just the owner of a fabric shop, but in her eyes, I am greater than anyone else. Please let me be with her. Young Jo said this with all his sincerity. Even Yoo Kyung realized that he truly loved Jung Eun and decided to give up. As for Jung Eun, after hearing Kang Woo's words of comfort, she thought about how hard it had been for them to come this far together, and she would not let the past shake their bond. Moreover, everyone could see the love that Young Jo had for Jung Eun. Therefore, she returned and joined him at the engagement ceremony. In front of everyone's blessings, Jung Eun was moved to tears. But it wasn't entirely because of happiness. It was because she had just learned that Handy was actually Young Jo's biological daughter. As soon as the ceremony ended, she went straight to Yoo Kyung's house and slapped her for hiding the truth all these years. Yoo Kyung clearly knew that if the truth came out, Young Jo would surely raise the child. Yet she went ahead and filed papers to make Handy a foster child, separating her from her real father. As for Yoo Kyung, it was Young Jo's father and grandfather who had turned her into a child without a mother. Now I'm just taking revenge on them. What's wrong with that? Moreover, no matter what sins she had committed, Yoo Kyung believed Young Jo would forgive her because she was the mother of his child. She told Jung Eun to look at the jar on the table. That was the same jar their mother had used to bring her porridge. Nothing can compare to blood ties. She is my mother, and Handy is my daughter. But you have nothing. That's an undeniable fact. No matter how much you sacrifice, it will never change. Afraid that one day Yoo Kyung might take everything away from her, Jung Eun lived in constant anxiety. When her daughter acted spoiled, Jung Yun even scolded her, surprising her and mother. This was the first time her mother had seen her so angry with her daughter, so she guessed that something must have happened to make Jung Yun feel pressured. When they went into the room, her mother asked her what was wrong, but Jung Yun refused to say anything and insisted on hiding it. Instead, she asked, "Between me and Yu Kyung, who would you choose?" How could her mother answer that, when both were equally important to her? Not hearing the answer she wanted, Jung Yun felt deeply disappointed. At the filming site, she no longer had the energy to focus on her work. Just then, Hansu and Miryun excitedly ran over to tell her that since Sojin refused to accept the advertising offer for Youngjo's brand, Jung Yun had been chosen instead. For the sake of the man she loved, she tried her best to perform well during the photo shoot. Meanwhile, her mother brought the photos from the engagement ceremony to show the in-laws. While she praised them endlessly, Youngjo's mother only thought the bride's face looked gloomy. Moreover, besides Miryun, no other friend of the bride had attended the event. As for Yu Kyung, she had just signed a partnership contract with director Oh. Due to past conflicts with Kang Woo at work, after the director left, Yu Kyung took out a recorder and blackmailed the deputy director, demanding he hand over the confidential documents in his possession, or she would release the recording. Meanwhile, the fashion brand that Youngjo was about to launch suddenly received a copyright infringement lawsuit from the Haeju group. It was clear that the chairman was scheming to harm him, so Youngjo could no longer endure it and went directly to confront his brother. However, he did not have as much power as Youngdo and was forced by him to cancel the brand name and sell it to their company at 19 Selv, a low price in order to avoid bankruptcy. Being pushed into a corner by his own brother, Youngjo was devastated. No one could reach him, which made Jung-eun anxious and rush out to look for him everywhere. Yu Kyung also heard about this from the director. She wondered why the chairman would go against his younger brother like that, and he told her that Youngdo had always hated Youngjo for taking their father away from him. When he found out that their grandfather had handed the store over to Youngjo, his anger grew even stronger. But after marrying Youngjo's mother, he had already given everything up and no longer had any connection to his father. When Yu Kyung was born, her father had already passed away, so he was not the one who took her away from Mrs. Myungja. Hearing this, Yu Kyung became confused and curious about who had caused her to become an orphan. When she directly asked her mother, she learned that it was director Oh himself. It turned out that he had lied to frame the chairman and Youngjo's father. Now the truth was finally revealed. Yu Kyung deeply regretted abandoning her child. If it hadn't been for that one reckless moment, perhaps she and Youngjo could have had a happy family now. But it was too late to say anything, because he was already very happy with Jung Yun. She was the one who had gone through great effort to find him and gave him the greatest comfort. When the two of them had just returned, Yu Kyung suddenly called Youngjo. From the phone, he heard her crying desperately, which made him extremely worried. He immediately asked for her location and drove there to see what was happening. When he arrived, he saw Yu Kyung sitting on the ground, crying uncontrollably, which left him completely confused. When he asked what was wrong, Yu Kyung said that her car had broken down and couldn't start, and that she was all alone in such a dark place, so she was very scared. Seeing her like that, Youngjo decided to take her home, but she didn't want him to leave and kept crying, repeatedly saying sorry, which made him wonder what exactly Yu Kyung had done to make her look so miserable now. But she didn't have the courage to tell him the truth. When Youngjo was about to leave, he ran into Kang Woo. Seeing him visiting his ex so late at night, Kang Woo became angry on Jung-eun's behalf and punched him, telling him that on the day of the engagement, Jung-eun had seen him with Yu Kyung, which caused her to run away from the ceremony. This was the first time Youngjo learned about it, and he felt guilty for not noticing Jung-eun's feelings lately. As soon as he got home, he explained everything clearly to her and assured her that there was absolutely nothing between him and his ex-girlfriend. At the same time, Youngjo had found evidence proving that the design samples had already been used in Paris before Youngdo registered the copyright, so he could no longer file a lawsuit. If Youngdo still refused to stop, Youngjo would report him to the board of directors. Once they found out that Youngdo had spent such huge resources just to destroy a small company, his position as chairman would certainly be at risk. Faced with Youngjo's threat, he had no choice but to back down. In the end, Youngjo's products were successfully launched on the market and became loved by customers. Orders increased rapidly, forcing the workers to work overtime, but they were all excited because the products they made were finally recognized. The chairman was, of course, overjoyed and praised Youngjo endlessly. Youngjo then asked him to help buy back the shares that Youngdo was holding. Meanwhile, Jung Yun went to meet her mother-in-law to strengthen their relationship. The two agreed to chat at a cafe nearby. Jung-eun arrived first to wait for her, but unexpectedly ran into Yu Kyung. Yu Kyung said that she no longer hated Youngjo as she once did, and that she would take him back, which frightened Jung-eun. However, she was sure that Yu Kyung would never dare tell Youngjo the truth, that Handy was his biological daughter. Because if he knew, how could he ever forgive the woman who had abandoned his child? While they were arguing, they saw the aunt approaching. Yu Kyung Kyung quickly left, but when she noticed the ring on her hand, she was startled, which caught the older woman's attention. After that incident, Jung Yun felt very uneasy. When she met Young Jo, she asked if he had any intention of getting back with his ex-girlfriend. Young Jo immediately kissed her to prove that his love for her would never change. Meanwhile, Seojin met with Kangwoo to decline a movie role. She felt that playing a widow didn't suit her, so she decided to give the role to Jung Yun. They even pretended to argue, and threw things around the office to make Yoo Kyung believe they were truly fighting, so she would agree to let Jung Yun take the lead role. Director Oh also made the same suggestion to her, because now Jung Eun had gained a huge fan base, and she was also the fiancé of Young Jo, the man who would soon become the next owner of the Haeju Group. After defeating Young Do, the director was certain that day was not far off. He also intended to reopen the investigation into the old scandal that had caused him to lose actress Myung-ja. Terrified that everything would be exposed, Yoo Kyung panicked and demanded that the deputy director quickly hand over the documents related to the old man's embezzlement. Later, she stopped by the park to secretly watch her daughter from afar. If she hadn't believed those lies, she would have been able to stay by her child's side now. As soon as Handy saw her, the little girl happily ran up to greet her politely and invited her to come home and play. The aunt who came to pick Handy up also recognized Yoo Kyung and, together with the child, brought her home. As soon as they entered the room, Handy excitedly brought out her toys and a photo album to show Yoo Kyung. Inside were photos of the girl from when she was a newborn, which moved Yoo Kyung to tears. She had never witnessed her child growing up, and now she could only see it through these photos, which broke her heart. Handy even brought out the family pictures to show her. Seeing Jung Eun appear in those photos made her feel jealous, and even more regretful for having thrown everything away and gone abroad to escape alone in the past. Outside, Jung Eun and her mother had just returned. Hearing that Yoo Kyung was there, they were startled and panicked. Jung Eun rushed into the room, found an excuse to send her daughter away, and then angrily tried to drive Yoo Kyung out. But Yoo Kyung turned to her and asked, "What right do you have to be here, Jung Eun? This isn't even your house." Hearing that, Jung Eun froze, unable to say a word, because it was the truth. Wanting to reclaim what she believed was rightfully hers, Yoo Kyung revealed to her mother that Young Jo was Handy's biological father. "He's the man who belongs to me, not to Jung Eun. But because of one mistake, she had abandoned them." Hearing this, their mother was shocked and speechless. She was caught in the middle, suffering greatly, not knowing what to do to make things right for both sides. When Young Jo returned home, his mother immediately questioned him about who the owner of the ring was. She suspected that it was Yoo Kyung, since she had noticed something unusual about the relationship between the three of them. She also mentioned that in the past, Yoo Kyung had once asked her who had taken Mrs. Myung-ja's daughter away. That detail made him feel something was strange, so he went to see the man who had previously investigated the video, and the man showed him the original footage. It was clearly just a rehearsal scene, proving that Jung Yun was not Mrs. Lee's biological daughter. This discovery was beyond his imagination, and he immediately wanted to meet Yoo Kyung to get the truth. When she received Young Jo's call, her whole body trembled in fear, not knowing how to face him. Now, even if she tried to hide it, it would be useless. Yoo Kyung understood that better than anyone, so she honestly confessed to Young Jo that she was the one who had uploaded the video online, and that she was Mrs. Myung-ja's biological daughter. What puzzled him most was why Jung Yun had helped Yoo Kyung hide the truth. She said that she had begged Jung Yun, and with her kind-hearted nature, Jung Yun naturally couldn't refuse. Learning that everything had been orchestrated by Yoo Kyung, Young Jo was furious. He no longer wanted to see this wicked woman, and left. But even his steps were unsteady, as he was overwhelmed with guilt for how poorly he had treated Jung Eun in the past. Yoo Kyung now regretted everything more than anyone else. Unable to bear the torment any longer, she ran after Young Jo and revealed another secret. "The day I returned the ring to you, I was already pregnant, but I abandoned that child. Handy is your biological daughter. You're lying. How could that be true? The hospital records clearly state that Jung Yun is the child's mother, because I wrote her name on the papers." Hearing that, Young Jo was completely stunned. It was too great a shock for him to process. No matter how much Yoo Kyung begged for forgiveness, it was useless. He left her there and rushed out into the street, heedless of the busy traffic. Jung Eun already knew that he had gone to see Yoo Kyung that day, but she did nothing. She simply stayed home quietly, waiting for him to return. Her mother, however, was uneasy. Even though it was late, she took a taxi to visit her daughter to see if she was all right. By then, Yoo Kyung was no longer in a stable state of mind. As soon as she saw her mother, she burst into tears and confessed all her wrongdoings. She knew she was wrong, but still hoped to be forgiven, especially by her daughter. The invitation card that Handy had sent to Kangwoo was still being kept by Yoo Kyung. showing how deeply she longed to be reunited with her daughter. Seeing that, her mother felt heartbroken and hugged her tightly. Meanwhile, young Jo did not return home all night. When Jung Yun was about to leave for work, she discovered him sitting in front of the gate but not coming in. After everything that had happened, both of them understood what the other had gone through, but neither asked any questions. They simply acted as if nothing had happened. As soon as young Jo stepped into the yard, Mrs. Lee called him over to talk. She understood better than anyone the conflict of emotions in his heart at that moment. But she also knew that Yu Kyung had her own suffering, and she hoped that young Jo could forgive her. However, he refused completely, saying that for the rest of his life, he never wanted to see a woman like her again. Kang Woo had also just learned the truth, and he was shocked by how much Jung Yun had endured, making him wish even more that young Jo would make it up to her. He told young Jo that Jung Yun had already mentally prepared herself for the day he would abandon her. It was Yu Kyung who had planted that thought in her mind. Even though their relationship had ended long ago, Yu Kyung often told Jung Yun how much young Jo had once loved her, how he tore up his plane ticket and gave up going abroad just to stay with her. But in Jung Yun's eyes, Yu Kyung was now the most pitiful one. Afraid that staying longer would only lead to more arguments, she quietly left before things could get worse. At that moment, the aunt called the house to ask Yu Kyung about the reason why young Jo had become so devastated. She had never seen her son in such pain, torturing himself like that, so the reason must have been something terrible. Yu Kyung kept avoiding eye contact, which only deepened the woman's suspicion, until she gradually began to realize who Yu Kyung truly was. Hearing that Yu Kyung was the one who gave birth to Handy meant that she was the person who had abandoned both young Jo and her own child. Unable to bear it, the mother grabbed Yu Kyung and hit her repeatedly. But Yu Kyung didn't fight back, letting her do whatever she wanted. At that time, young Jo held a large number of Henju's shares, while his brother was about to be dismissed from his position. Because of that, Director Oh wanted to win young Jo over to his side, and also asked him to persuade Jung Yun to sign a contract with his company. However, Jung Jo had no intention of competing for the chairman's position with his brother. He agreed to give back his shares, so that Young Do could regain his title, on the condition that his brother would let him manage the company's film division. Meanwhile, Yu Kyung secretly met with the deputy director to obtain all the documents related to the embezzlement crimes of Kang Woo's father. When she returned to the office and heard that Young Jo was there, she wanted to apologize to him, hoping he could forgive her. But Young Jo refused to accept it, and angrily warned Yu Kyung never to go near Handy again. Ever since she had written another woman's name on the child's birth certificate, she had lost all right to call herself the girl's mother. After everything they had been through, Young Jo cherished Jung Yun even more. The love he now had for her was deeper than anything he had ever felt for Yu Kyung. Jung Yun also introduced her biological mother to him, allowing Young Jo to officially meet her. The two stayed together in the room all night, and Mrs. Lee knew she shouldn't disturb them. By now, everything seemed to have reached its conclusion. She only hoped that Yu Kyung could let go, stop torturing herself, and allow Young Jo to move on. Because no matter what, the truth remained that she was Handy's mother. At that time, the deputy director, before escaping, told Kang Woo that Yu Kyung was holding evidence of his father's crimes. If he didn't stop her before the board meeting, things would become irreversible. Although Kang Woo had always had conflicts with his father, they were still bound by blood. So, he humbled himself and went to beg Yu Kyung to spare him. However, she couldn't forgive that man so easily. At the very least, she wanted to reclaim the shares that the director possessed, as they had once belonged to her mother. Knowing he couldn't persuade her, Kang Woo turned to Young Jo for help, as he was the only one who could stop her now. He was terrified that if things fell apart, his father would end up in prison. To make it easier to intervene, Young Jo officially transferred his shares back to his brother and became the director of the group's film division. That same day was also Jung Yun's first day of filming. The opening scene was one of her giving birth in the hospital. The moment Yu Kyung saw Jung Yun lying on the delivery bed, she remembered the pain she had endured 6 years ago and how much she had suffered to give birth to Handy. Their eyes stayed locked on each other, as if they shared the same thoughts. When the scene ended, Yu Kyung brought Jung Eun a can of soda. Although Jung Eun had never been a mother herself, her performance was so moving that even Yu Kyung had to admit how good she was. And even though, to this day, Jung Eun still didn't see Yu Kyung as Handy's mother, that truth would never change. After all, Yu Kyung was still a mother who wanted to be close to her child. That day, Handy's aunt brought her to the filming set for a visit, but because of an urgent matter, she left Handy in Yu Kyung's care. Yu Kyung then took the little girl to her office to play. Handy was very excited and asked her to call her father. However, when Young Jo found out that his daughter was with Yu Kyung, he became furious. assuming that she had forced the child to go with her, and immediately called his mother. Upon hearing the news, Mrs. Lee hurried there right away, but when she arrived at the office, neither of them was there. Growing more worried, she rushed to Yukyung's house and saw her cooking for the little girl. The two looked so close and happy together that Mrs. Lee couldn't bring herself to separate them. But at that moment, young Jo also arrived. He didn't want his daughter to have any contact with this woman, so he forced Handy to go home, even though the little girl wanted to keep playing with Yukyung. Refusing to allow it, he angrily dragged his daughter away, leaving Yukyung helplessly watching them go. All she could do was quietly look at photos of her daughter on her phone, smiling softly with happiness. But even that was taken from her by Jung Yun. She deleted all of Handy's photos, leaving Yukyung no chance to get close to the girl again. When Yukyung tried to grab the phone back, Jung Yun pushed her away and angrily warned, "If the two of you keep fighting like this, Handy will end up just like Yukyung 16 years ago, forced to witness that she's just an adopted child, abandoned by her real mother." The next day, as soon as Yukyung arrived at the company, the director told her to meet the newly appointed CEO. He was someone she already knew, and just as she was wondering who it might be, she was shocked to see that it was young Jo. Without beating around the bush, he demanded that she hand over Director O's accounting records. If she refused, he would release that video, leaving her with no way out. Though he was harsh with her, his attitude toward Jung Yun was completely different. That day, she officially signed her contract and became an artist under young Jo's company. But before anyone could celebrate, they received news that Handy had to be taken to the hospital for tests. Yukyung was also called there by her mother because the doctors needed to test all family members, and she was the child's biological mother. After the nurse drew blood from both Yukyung and young Jo, their part was done, and the results would be ready in a week. Even though Yukyung was Handy's biological mother, she couldn't help but worry deeply. She hoped that once the test results were ready, young Jo would tell her, but instead, he scolded her, saying she had no right to ask, leaving her feeling helpless. Only Jung Yun felt sorry for Yukyung and promised to inform her when the results came out. Later, Jung Yun went to pick up her daughter and told her mother to visit Yukyung, thinking that what she needed most at that moment was comfort. When her mother arrived, before they could even talk, Yukyung suddenly felt nauseous and rushed to the restroom. Her mother grew worried, fearing she might be ill, but it was only a symptom of extreme stress. Yukyung promised her mother that she would reclaim the film company, which shocked her. From young Jo, she learned that Yukyung possessed critical evidence that could bring down Director O. Once that day came, all the buried secrets would finally be revealed. Around that time, reporters came to the company, asking about the original video from years ago. They suspected that Jung Yun was connected to the scandal involving actress Lee Myung-ja. If they continued to dig deeper, the film she was currently shooting might be boycotted. The entire production team panicked, as they had invested heavily in the project. However, Kang Woo reassured everyone that there was no need to worry too much. At the same time, when everything was about to be made public, Yukyung accepted that she would lose her career, as long as she could bring down Director O and openly reclaim her mother. However, before that could happen, the deputy director told him everything. Of course, the old man wouldn't let her get away so easily. The chairman's assistant saw a group of gangsters heading toward Director O's office and immediately ran to report it. Young Do quickly called his younger brother, urging him to handle the situation at once. Meanwhile, the thugs began smashing everything in the office, searching for the accounting records. When Yukyung arrived, she was shocked and hadn't even reacted before they grabbed her and demanded to know where the documents were. Yukyung refused to hand them over, so they decided to take her away. Just then, young Jo arrived in time to rescue her. He rushed in and fought the gang, but since they outnumbered him, he was quickly overpowered. Before things could get worse, one of the men recognized young Jo and ordered them to stop. The group then quickly fled the scene. Upon hearing what had happened, Kang Woo stormed into his father's office in fury. After seeing everything his father had done, he was speechless. He only begged him to stop and not to touch Yukyung for now, so that he could handle things properly. At the same time, young Jo urged Yukyung to stop her revenge, as it was far too dangerous. He offered to give her the remaining shares he held, with one condition: let's never see each other again. Every time young Jo saw Yukyung, his heart ached terribly over what she had done to him and their daughter. When the test results finally came out, the doctor said that although Handy had a weakened immune system, it wasn't serious and could be treated with medication. Just as they were about to breathe a sigh of relief, the doctor added that the real problem was with Yukyung. Her immune system had been severely damaged, and he suspected that she might have hepatitis. The doctor urged her to come to the hospital as soon as possible for further examination and treatment. When they learned that Yukyung was ill, both Jung Yun and Young-jo were worried. But since Young-jo and Yu-kyung had promised never to see each other again, it was difficult for him to say anything. So Jung Yun went to her house alone, not only to tell her about Handy's condition, but also to urge her to go to the hospital for a checkup. Even after hearing that she might be sick, Yu-kyung's expression didn't change. Ever since learning that her mother had cancer, she had already suspected that one day the same thing might happen to her. Around that time, Handy's grandmother heard that the little girl was sick and rushed to her house, bringing along some nutritious food. At first, Handy only had a mild cold, but by nightfall, she suddenly developed a high fever of 39 degrees. Seeing that the situation was serious, her grandmother immediately told Young-jo to drive the child to the hospital. Meanwhile, Director Oh had someone investigate the child. He discovered that the baby he had taken from Mrs. Myung-ja years ago was actually Yu-kyung. Now he finally understood why she had always gone against him. When Yu-kyung received his call, she became terrified. She wanted to meet her mother to tell her everything, but upon hearing that Handy had been hospitalized, she rushed there in panic, forgetting everything else. When she arrived, Yu-kyung ran into Young-jo. He didn't want her near his daughter, but since she pleaded so earnestly, he reluctantly allowed it just this once. Thanks to that, she was able to spend some time with her child. Meanwhile, Jung Yun was busy filming and hadn't heard what happened, so Young-jo personally went to the set to pick her up. As soon as she arrived, Jung Yun rushed inside, worried sick about Handy, only to find Yu-kyung already there. When Yu-kyung saw Jung Yun, she turned to Handy and said, "Your mother has arrived," as if silently acknowledging that Jung Yun was the girl's true mother, while someone like her, who had abandoned Handy, was not worthy of that title. Before leaving, Yu-kyung said goodbye to her mother and reminded her to attend the shareholders' meeting, telling her that she herself would be going abroad for work for a while. She told Young-jo the same thing, promising that she would quietly disappear from his life and never bother him again. But just a few steps later, Yu-kyung suddenly collapsed. The nurse who saw it immediately rushed her onto a stretcher for emergency treatment. The doctor, who had previously arranged to see her personally, took charge of her examination and ran tests to determine what illness she was suffering from. Meanwhile, the 7-year-old video was made public, causing enormous repercussions. Not only did Jung Yun get caught up in the scandal, but the public also learned that Yu-kyung was Mrs. Myung-ja's daughter, leaving everyone confused and worried that the film would be severely affected. However, no one was able to contact Yu-kyung. Around that time, her test results also came back, confirming that she had hepatitis. Medication alone would be difficult, and the best option was a liver transplant. Yu-kyung said she planned to go to the US for treatment, but the doctor refused to let her travel in such a weak condition. After much pleading, he finally allowed her one day to settle her affairs before being hospitalized. Upon returning, Yu-kyung immediately went to meet Director Oh. Had she arrived a bit earlier the previous night, the video wouldn't have been exposed. She handed over the accounting records, but instead of giving them to the director, she entrusted them to Kang Woo. Since he was the director's son, the man completely trusted him, without realizing that Kang Woo would later reveal everything during the board meeting. Meanwhile, Jung Yun held a press conference to tell the truth to the media. However, before she could speak, Mrs. Myung-ja appeared, wanting to take responsibility in Jung Yun's place. Standing before the reporters, she declared that Jung Yun was not her daughter and had not released the video to clear her name. She then confirmed that Han Yu-kyung was the daughter she had abandoned 31 years ago, leaving everyone in shock. In the end, everything was resolved peacefully, and Mrs. Myung-ja became the new director of Haeju Film Company. After Director Oh's crimes were exposed and he was dismissed, Yu-kyung was admitted to the hospital for treatment. However, her condition continued to worsen. Eating became difficult, and she constantly vomited. During one of her weakest moments, Yu-kyung watched her mother's press conference and heard the apology Mrs. Myung-ja had always wanted to say. Hearing those words made her truly happy. It was the greatest comfort she could have while battling her illness. But in truth, neither her mother nor anyone else knew that Yu-kyung was hospitalized. One day, Young-jo and Jung Yun brought their daughter to the hospital for a follow-up appointment. By coincidence, Young-jo ran into Yu-kyung's doctor and found out that she was there. When he saw Yu-kyung lying frail and exhausted on the hospital bed, he couldn't pretend that nothing was wrong. He was deeply heartbroken and shaken, learning that she hadn't been able to eat for 2 weeks and had been suffering constantly from her illness. Since Jung Yun was Yu-kyung's only true friend, Young-jo thought she should know about her condition. When Jung Yun entered the room, she couldn't even bring herself to look at the pitiful sight before her. The woman who had caused so much turmoil was now reduced to this, and it broke Jung Yun's heart. All she wished for was that Yu-kyung could recover, but Yu-kyung feared she didn't have much time left to live. Her only wish was that her mother would never have to see her in such a frail state. But Jung Yun couldn't bring herself to hide the truth from Mrs. Myung-ja. Together with Young-jo, she brought Yu-kyung home so she could be close to her mother. The moment Mrs. Myung-ja saw her daughter, she broke down in tears, crying until no tears were left. In the days that followed, every time Yoo-kyung opened her eyes, she saw friends and loved ones visiting her one after another, including the daughter she loved most, who wept for her mother. Each day, she was given meals lovingly prepared by her mother and Jung Yun. They searched for nutritious dishes to help Yoo-kyung regain her strength and fight the illness. After some time, her condition began to improve. Her liver function slowly recovered, bringing immense joy to her mother. Even her adoptive mother from abroad returned to visit. After so many years apart, seeing her daughter again moved the woman to tears. Though she hadn't given birth to her, she had raised her with love and care. Yoo-kyung could never forget the woman who had brought her up. Her family overseas also longed to see her again, so she decided to travel with her adoptive mother to visit them. On the day of departure, Jung Yun went to the airport to see her off. Yoo-kyung told her she planned to settle in the US and didn't know when she might return. But there was one thing Yoo-kyung had always wanted to say to Jung Yun for a long time, a heartfelt thank you. If Jung Yun hadn't brought her home and cared for her that day, Yoo-kyung might have passed away in loneliness. That same day was also the premiere of the film, in which Jung Yun played the lead role. Many fans came to show their support out of love for her. Her whole family and close friends were also present to share in her joy. All of Jung Yun's hard work over the years had finally been rewarded. She now had both the successful career and the loving family she had always dreamed of. And with that, the story comes to an end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give us a like, a subscription, and a share to support our work. Thank you all for watching.